Morning, friends, associates. The fourth chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, I like to have a volunteer to read one paragraph of the volume because the Theosophical movement is timeless. It goes back into the night of time. And to get an example of how far back, um, yeah, just that first paragraph. Yes, right there.
Um, Devotion through spiritual knowledge. Krishna speaking. This exhaustless doctrine of yoga I formerly taught unto Vivasvat. Vivasvat is the sun. Vivasvat communicated it to Manu, and Manu made it known unto Ishvaku. Ishvaku is the Indian solar dynasty, and being thus transmitted from one unto another, it was studied by the Rajarshis, until at length, in the course of time, the mighty art was lost, O harasser of thy foes. It is even the same exhaustless, secret, eternal doctrine I have this day communicated unto thee, because thou art my devotee and my friend.
Thank you. What if one was to go into the notes on the Bhagavad Gita, they would find that that's in fact referring to this eternal exhaustless doctrine that is the Theosophical movement. One can go back to the beginning of the Manvantara or Manvantra and see that very great cycle. And at the beginning of that very great cycle, you do have those beings who come into play in this cycle to commence once again where they left off. And at the beginning of this very large cycle, you do have great beings, and the beings referring to that was just read, these Dhanis, avatars, etc., who come in to once again strike the keynote for the cycle. And to show an idea or to give an idea of how far back the Theosophical movement goes, is that's what's been alluded to. We're going to work up to the modern incarnation of the Theosophical um, movement, which happens, the modern with the advent of Madame Blavatsky's arrival upon the scene 137 years ago, yesterday, as a matter of fact, November 17th. And speaking of November 17th, while I have it before me, the reference to November 17th, today is 18th, so it's just yesterday. If one takes a look at page 179 in the Secret Doctrine on the subtitle of The Birthday of the Dhyanis, it said, on the 10th day of the second month, on the 17th day of the 11th month, and on the 7th day of the third month, gives the occultist the greatest facility for performing what are called magic feats. The future of an individual is seen, and with all its coming events marshaled in order in a magic mirror placed under the ray of certain constellations. But beware of the reverse of the metal sorcery. So one can see that the modern incarnation of the Theosophical movement, those beings who came forth to implement it, had a knowledge of the cycles and seasons in which they performed or started their work. But for just to retrogress for a moment, to go back to the ancient part of the Theosophical movement, this student chose to start at least with the third race because back then and there, they say mind was lit up. And so mind being lit requires those beings to give assistance to those mindless beings who are lit up. And the Theosophical movement, among other things, is a movement of ideas, and ideas are generated through and from the mind. So then we go to that era or that epoch. Now, about the third race. As we know in Theosophy, we have there are none that are here that are new and different, so we don't have to go through all the history of the various races. But to begin with the third race, just a few notes, and 1 second. The third race is known as the sweat-born, is also the egg-bearing. It says the third race of mankind is the most mysterious of all because it's in the third race that the mind is lit up, and also there's male and female. 18 million years ago, we have to go back to. And that's where, again, those great beings come into play, and that race is called the Lemurian race. There is, throughout the literature, various references to Lemuria and those beings. And HPB mentions also that that was the time the whole human race was of one language and of one lip. So there wasn't this confusion of languages, okay? Male and female comes about, mind is lit. And these are the ones who, individuals of that, particularly the sixth subrace of the third race, that built cities out of cut rock. So today we find modern archaeologists and anthropologists assuming that aliens have come to the earth and built these what's called mysteries today. You know, there's a series on TV called Ancient Aliens, and they're looking throughout the world, but because they haven't looked towards the theosophical literature to find, in fact, that, or had they looked at theosophical literature, they would find that mankind's history on this planet is farther than the 6,000 years given by the church, and so many thousands of millions that they have given for the caveman coming out of the man coming from the cave, from the ape. So theosophical history kicks it back farther and farther. 18 million years ago is just to the physical formation, the completion of the physical man. And Mr. Judge, in an article on the Arabian Nights, he referenced this. He says, the secret doctrine tells us that the Lemurians of the sixth subrace built rock-cut cities out of stone and lava. And one of the adventures of Ulysses, when he puts out the eye of the Cyclops, the one-eyed Cyclops, the giant called Polyphemus. The Cyclops belongs to the third or Lemurian race, while Ulysses belongs to the fourth race. Okay, and it's again, this is conceived sometimes as myth and symbolic and symbolism, but a part of the language that has been used to record the history of mankind is presented through myths, fables, fairy tales. To give an example, once again, the ancient source speaks about how the power of occult symbolism is such that it can be written down on a few pages of signs and glyphs. And to give an example of this, if one goes to the first volume of the Secret Doctrine, you can see right here, these symbols here, it's 12, they're 12 in number, but inside these 12 symbols is a whole lot of history. From the beginning of a man-made tower to, you come down here to the third race and beyond. So just the symbol is so powerful and potent, not to mention the myths, which are also needing to be, well, one needs seven, according to HPV, one needs 7 keys to fully understand the myth. If not, then you distort it, or you're going right when you should be going, you're going left when you should be going right. Now, to move in further to the ancient world, more closer to our time, we see that in various nations there was this system of initiation throughout the lands, east and west, ancient times. And that system of initiation proves that there was this movement of knowledge from the few to those who were capable and able to receive what was the divine wisdom that was passed on. Throughout the history of, let's say, early Europe, early Rome, early Greece, one can research the history. If you take, it's stated in the Great Theosophy series, if you examine the first 500 years BC, and then you examine the second, well, 500 years AD, one can find a big difference between what was flourishing in terms of the movement of ideas, thought, the freedom of movement, free thinkers, and with the event of the church's arrival, there is a reference to Apollonius, a great adept, who was on the scene, and Mr. Judge states that it was a descending cycle. And why was it descending? Because, again, the church was, well, those who know the cycles know that with light comes a shadow. And with the rise of the Christian church, you have the shadow. You have at this time a destruction of the various schools. Philosophy is denigrated. It's even considered a crime, a state crime, and one can be put to death for certain ideas that one held. And we see that those individuals were put to death. In fact, Hypatia, 414 AD, was an example. Bruno was another example. And the burning of the books. Books contain ideas, and not just in the Christian world, but in the Islamic world, even up to the modern incarnation of Adolf Hitler, where they burned books. So we can see how ideas are powers, and they are very dangerous ideas. So we have the Dark Ages, with the destruction of theosophical, well, the enemies just come right out and say it, with light comes darkness, and they oppose one another. And for some reason, the universe is the one of duality. You have contrast, and through evil, one knows about good. So this is why HBB, in her article, Theosophy versus Jesuitism, she tells, choose ye this day whom you will serve. And in that article, which I have here, she states that of the two powers that are rising, it's either Theosophy or Jesuitism. And they represent two poles. One pole represents the star from above and the wisdom from above, and the second, the devilish wisdom from below, dark, stagnant. And that will be mentioned later on, but since we're in this ancient, but not very, very ancient world, we have to speak of how she attacked theological Christianity, because with the formation of organized religion came all kinds of inquisitions, confessions, auricular confessions, burning of people, burning of books, etc. Knowledge was supplanted with belief, blind belief at best. So you can see how later on, Ammonius Saccas and those theosophists who came together to inculcate or manifest the theosophical movement once again, what they had to deal with. And eventually their school in Alexandria was destroyed as well. So you see that it's been a struggle of these spiritual ideas, and even now it's still the struggle. The struggle continues. The struggle will always be there, again, because of the contrast or the duality of good versus evil, or light and darkness. And through the Renaissance, and then finally we have Tsongkhapa indicating the cycle of every 100 years. We're familiar with all that, where a great teacher will come and present once again the ideas of the Theosophical movement to keep it moving. Coming to HPB's time now, we see that she comes upon the scene 137 years ago, and she's met with a wall of ignorance. You have that wall of ignorance being composed of Darwinian evolution, also spiritualism, and scientific materialism. We have references here where HPB calls Darwin, Haeckel, and Huxley, and these individuals, her references, in fact, to get it from her, she states that these individuals that just named here, she calls them, she wrote, Haeckel, Karl Vogt, Bücher in Germany, and Huxley and his co-thinkers in England are simply the intellectual and moral murderers of future generations. So you can see where people were just locked into physical materialism on a biological side, and then also with the Christianity. So, but spiritualism, when she first comes upon the scene, she's involved with the spiritualists because the spiritualism or spiritualism, yeah, represents that transitional stage from the physical into the post-mortem afterlife of an individual. And that's where she first connected with those individuals and eventually had to leave them because she had to tell them they didn't know what they were doing as well. They were all into seances, etc. But a lot of these individuals eventually went and came into the Theosophical movement or joined the Theosophical Society. As a matter of fact, Colonel Alcott, he was in Sinet. A lot of these individuals, they were basically interested in phenomena. HBB came forth with an ethical and more moral reformation or revolution, whereas these individuals, they were still stuck at that level of wanting to produce magic things and want to see things. So they eventually turned against her, and they become the great enemy of the Theosophical movement. As a matter of fact, in the book here, the Theosophical movement, names are given of individuals who actually betrayed, lied, traduced her name, and who eventually became enemies to destroy the movement, from spiritualists all across the board to Brahmins, who tried to, HPB's mission was again to come to awaken the manas, the higher manas, the booty of the race. But those individuals who were selfish, Subaru and others from the East, they saw what was going on, and then there's this tendency of mankind to keep, well, the selfishness of mankind, if he's still in his lower nature, to hoard, possess knowledge for himself. And she and Judge and others who began the movement there had to deal with this problem. At the time of HB's arrival upon the scene, the soul, such an invisible thing, had become they say here, a theological relic, an artifact, and a poetic reference put on the shelf belonging to the Middle Ages. So the soul was a thing that wasn't even considered anymore, but maybe by very few individuals. Coming to, well, back to HPB's time, there were those souls who came to assist. We had William Q. Judge, and he was vilified and considered and betrayed as well among those who were a part of the movement within the lodges themselves, because after HPB leaves, there's this question of successorship. And that was a very, very, very important thing. When Mr. Crosby comes about in 1909 to start the United Lodge of Theosophists, and you read the declaration, says this lodge has no constitution, bylaws, or officers, because since the time and passing of HPB to the times of Mr. Judge passing in 1896, we see people rising to the position of authority instead of responsibility. And Theosophy got to the point, it had its failures. It has had its successes. The Theosophical movement is dual. There's the higher nature, which belongs to those higher flowers who carry on the movement, whose intentions is to give mankind the light, and then those who are part of the movement who, through failures of their own, who become the lower part of the movement, and they get into positions, and there's even references how some individuals were referred to as a theosophical pope. It had just denigrated to that level of an organization instead of an association, as what was read in the declaration. Eventually, Mr. Crosby comes along, and then we have Mr. Wadia, who comes along also to assist in the further development of the Theosophical movement, to put the movement, but the society back on track of the original program of the movement. And we know, the students here know about the history, so there's no need to go further into that. But coming down to now, in terms of the present, where is Theosophy now, and what has been Theosophy's influence in the world? Well, on several levels. In science and art, where we have studies in noetic sciences, astral bodies, karma and reincarnation, all these things are prevalent in society. As a matter of fact, what this student did, normally what I do sometimes, I did a man on the street survey. I went around and I asked various individuals, homeless individuals, lawyers, people on the street, people on the metro, everyday working people. I stopped one lady at this red light, and I was asking them 3 questions. One, have you heard of karma? And do you believe in karma? Or what's your take on karma? And then reincarnation, same thing. And was it positive or negative for you? And then finally, the 3rd question was, have you heard of Theosophy? And I did only 50 people this time around. Of the survey for karma, 28 said yes, they've heard of karma, and roughly all of those believed in karma in some way, in some positive sense. In reincarnation, of that same number, only 6 accepted it. Their response was, well, it's not in the Bible, or I believe in the Bible. And I didn't want to go further to furthering the idea or the conversation, saying that it is in fact in the Bible, but just to say. But one lady did say, well, Jesus came back from the dead. At least it showed that she was thinking. So you do have those individuals who are out there thinking. And then in terms of, and then finally I asked them, have you heard of Theosophy? And of the 50, 9 have. One lady said, Theosophy, oh yeah, Madame Blavatsky, like that, immediately. So just for contemporary day-to-day people that we're passing in the streets, that's just a short survey of where people are. On a broader level, we see in society, we see films that are out now. What the Blink, what's that film? The name of that film? What the Blink do you think? Or something like that. There are all kinds of films out. The Harry Potter films, the Green Movements, all that. All these are a result of HPBs coming to present these doctrines again. We can go back into the Rosicrucians, we can go back into anthroposophy, Rudolf Steiner and all those individuals who started their organizations, the I Am organization that's around, Manly P. Hall with the Masonic thing. These individuals who initially were a part of the Theosophical Society and eventually they broke away, and then the people who succeeded HPB, they rose again to positions. Miss Kingley, Alice Bailey, Annie Besant, all these people, they distorted the original doctrines, and this is why Mr. Crosby this is just too much. He removed himself, and those followers who came along with Mr. Crosby, they started putting copies, well, facsimile copies, because if you read the works of HPB, they say these are facsimile copies of her original works. So that's pretty much where things are, and I would say that what's needed is according to one of the Mahatma's commentary, we need a new continent of thought. We need more recruits to come in, but then again, they say Theosophy is not, no one has ever converted to Theosophy. If you into Theosophy, you've been into it before. So it's a gradual awakening. And some kind of way, that's what's, I guess, the nudge, the nudge or the shaking of the individuals who do have it latent within them. That's part of our job here, to carry on the Theosophical movement. And we have individuals on the scene like Einstein, who through science we can look at, and as great as he is in the Western icon or in the Western canon, he said one of the greatest defects of the Western world is the personal God idea. So I would like to leave it with that. Also, there is this, and then the ongoing, what's happening right now in the Theosophical, not necessarily right now, but within the last 20 years, there's some note, again, of looking for the teacher. And Mr. Judge, in one of these articles, thanks to Tunjai, he states here, if Mr. Judge is to be considered an individual who knew and knows still what was going on, and he states here, the teacher would be herself, beyond question, HPP herself. And this is written here in bold letters, who the next teacher would be. So that's, again, within the Theosophical movement, discussion that's been going on and still going on, but just wanted to bring that out, that if you follow strictly upon those lines, it's stated right there. So I guess that's one that we had in the past, examples of people deciding for themselves, wanting to go this way, that way, and it's open to each student to choose for his or herself as to which way they would go. But that doesn't close the idea that you're still within the Theosophical movement. Now I would like to end right there.
This issue that you mentioned at the last about the teacher, we need to incorporate the Russian Theosophists. Each and every one of them know that HPV is on the scene and that she was instrumental through Gorbachev's life to bring about that change in Russia itself.
Mm-hmm.
She works behind the scenes, and Gorbachev's wife is a Theosophist.
Okay.
And that's how that was achieved. That we are asking the question, but they already know that it's here.
Mm-hmm.
So that must be a perceptive power.
Okay. Yes, Josh?
Given what we know theosophically about we are not this body,
Mm-hmm.
and that HPV was not that body,
Mm-hmm.
is there an expectation that this new teacher would be HPV in that body, or even that gender, or from that race? I mean, is there anything that indicates that we should expect to see HPV
Walking through the door, that
with
same.
that name recently?
No, no.
Could HPV be in several bodies?
Don't go there.
Yeah.
Okay, we won't go there.
Yeah. No, to your, from this student's understanding, no, that's those same atoms that was used in that HPV body, in that sense, would be there, that same energy. The astral may be altered, something like that, but that outer form, I would say no. That's almost like these folks who believe in the resurrection of the body, you know, coming back. And so the great beings that they come to where they can be most effective, and they come, and that's the point that the first student made about the Russian aspect of the movement. She being of Russian origin initially in that last incarnation, that's interesting that the affinities and knowing how hard and tight and cold that world was and is, but yet how powerful on a physical level. So I can see, this student can see how coming back to that family lineage in that sense, in that part of the world. But like those advanced students beyond this student who looked into it and know, it seems probable, okay, that from this student's outside, not being a member of the higher advanced group, I can only say it seems probable that
What seems probable?
that what the first student just said about her being on the scene. If in fact you find the logic that she is, if you take what's said, that she's going to come back, okay, and she in the last incarnation was Russian, okay, and now you have this upheaval of this free thought, because it said wherever the Theosophical movement can be discerned, wherever there's freedom, you know, being the struggle for thought to be free and stuff like that. So, you know, I can just say probable there, okay, not just possible, but probable or plausible, okay. Yes.
Just briefly, it's worth noting that in that quote, you said it was in bold
Mm-hmm.
print.
Mm-hmm.
That was added by the compiler of that document. That was not in the original from Mr. Judge.
Mm-hmm.
Just for the record.
Okay, right. But yet it was just what was bold was there, but the words themselves was there, right? That she would be.
That is, I believe that's a quote from Judge.
Yeah, right. It is.
But the emphasis was placed on person.
I see. Okay, great. Okay, yes, Herb.
Are we not at serious risk of going off on a tangent? Like the first speaker said, we don't have time or inclination to go into side issues. The point here is that the path is there. If she showed us the path, if she showed us, she said, don't follow me, follow the path I show.
Mm-hmm.
And the focus here in the UOT is to continue to try to follow that path as she showed it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's this student's take on it anyway.
Sure.
To try to stay on that.
Absolutely.
You know.
Absolutely.
And as others have shown since then, trying to reflect what she said
Mm-hmm.
in different ways.
You're absolutely right, because you have here, I got by Mr. Judge out of his private letters, just to sort of like segue back a little bit, but staying in what you think or what you just stated. Mr. Judge, uh, recall when we were speaking about the Jesuits and how, of all the people, how powerful they were in terms of being enemies of the Theosophical movement. But here, he's referencing, oh, here we are. He's referencing this individual who was involved in a conspiracy against HPB, Dr. Coos. And Judge is saying that in one of his works, he says, this was and is a real nigger in the fence or woodpile, and C had an object which others did not foresee. And then on page 18, he comes back and said, he is either a Jesuit or a self-seeking ass. And then on 17, 18, but then on 27, Mr. Judge is saying here, just bear with me for a second. He says, if some New York people do not like publicity, let them plainly say so and ask for a private branch and keep it to themselves. To that I do not object. I would let in cranks, Jesuits, anybody, for I know that if the leaders had to keep, for I know that if the leaders keep the objects plainly in view, the cranks and Jesuits will be of nothing, because they can find no place for their plans. So it gets back to what has been said here. If you stick to the platform straight forward, you have nothing to hide, okay? And if you have nothing to hide and you understand the original platform, there's no glamour of personalities. We're all students, and one cannot be swayed, you know. Those passive, weak type personalities that do come in, what safeguards that are already there for them in this modern 21st century is the fact that there's no constitution, bylaws, or officers. So we're not deluded by the personality of some strong individual who can come by and like in the Andy Bezant case and Sinet and all these guys, all called, who had been in the movement for years, and they were supposed to be beaming with all this wisdom. So if the person or the student is sincere and the books are there, the books are considered to be the messengers. The message is already in the literature. And HPB's, Judge, Crosby, and others, if you just stand fast to that right there, then I think there's a safeguard. Okay? You can work with a Jesuit, and he's your enemy, but you know where he's coming from. If you can
but can I not have a great appreciation for those personalities, if you will, who have come after HPB and Mr. Judge, who have tried to advance the movement and maybe recognize that and continue on?
Absolutely, absolutely. As long as one is talking about universal brotherhood, the three objects, you know, universal brotherhood, that's number one. The study of the hidden powers in man and all that kind of stuff comes later, and comparative study of sciences and philosophies, all that. But the main thing is universal brotherhood. If you hold fast to that, and there is some kind of positive movement on your part, the student's part, to go forward to try to adapt the teachings, it's a living wisdom. At first, I think those people who are, and I can't speak on a private thing, personal note, but Theosophy, after being associated with it for a while, it grabs the intellect, the mind, because it's so vast. But after dealing with it for a while, one begins to see that it's more than just intellectual knowledge. It's a living, organic movement, and it's from within, without. And so eventually, if the flame is turned on, you begin to see that there is this aspiration, there's this will, there's this desire to move forward at some point in time. And so if you're doing that, those older students will be able to, they say when the student is ready, the master will appear, something like that, or the teacher will appear. So as long as there's universal brotherhood, because I think that would keep one on the positive side, the safe side, and then if there's interactivity pushing one forward, those are the minimum requirements that's needed to stay. Yes?
The misunderstanding. HPB's statement is that each student has to become a nucleus unto themselves. In other words, make the philosophy a living power in yourself first. And then she says, others who have the same or similar ideology will be attracted to that same center, from which she says higher influences then can exude, and higher influences can be attracted to it. So that's the first criteria, that we make it a living power in ourselves.
As a matter of fact,
not make it a dogma.
I can't find a specific article out of the many little articles but it's almost verbatim what you just said, that each student is the Theosophical movement. Every time you are energized and go forward, you're perpetuating the Theosophical movement. And finally, a part of my current research as I go around to the bookstores and I look at the New Age stuff, the spirituality on the magazines, and I've come up with this little book here. It's called the Little Book of Secret Societies, right here. And of course, I got to flip through and find out if Theosophy is considered, and Theosophy is considered. Here you go, a secret society, and it says it's just one quick page, and there is she's calling or this person who wrote this book, Joel Levy. They have a drawing here of HPB at a. This is where she was considered a fraud, right here, because this was given, and it says here, drawing from a contemporary American newspaper at that particular time, depicting Helena Petrovna Blavatsky at a seance of dubious authenticity in 1873. Accusations of fraud dogged her career, and you have here various things about conspiracy theories. Blavatsky's Theosophy is the original source of many elements of the conspiracy theory universe, secret cabals, and then the skeptical view. Madame Blavatsky was a charlatan and a hoaxer. Her ascendant masters were a transparent invention, and she simply mashed together incoherent cocktail of modish philosophies and pseudoscience, adding a dash of unsavory racial theory for good. So this is for those people who are skeptical of HPB, and then everything is a conspiracy. So she still, but the point is today she is still alive. Okay, and for those of you who want to look, it's just right here. Right. But at the same time now, there is in 2005 there was the Blavatsky Defense Fund came about, because again there were those who was trying to defame the name, and that came about, and then they came out with certain books, and some people picked it up and said even these guys in their good intentions of carrying it on, but still beware, because they too had distorted some stuff. Anyway, you're going.
Is the Theosophical movement a secret society?
No, the Theosophical movement, is it a secret society? There are secrets within the Theosophical movement, but it's not a secret society. It's just like Jesus said to his disciples, to you it is given to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but for those who without, it's spoken parables, okay? And
well, do those teachers have any relevancy to the common man today?
Would those teachings have any relevancy to the? Yes, indeed.
Can you tell me what they are?
Well, know thyself to begin with. That would be relevant to start with. That basic. For instance, if this knowledge of these individuals, they have a knowledge of self, okay? If the average individual is approached on the street today, right today, upon leaving here, they cannot deny that they have a self, but they don't understand the knowledge or the powers or the origins of that self, except through an ape or through Christian teachings or any kind of religious teachings. What Theosophy does, it tells you that, number one, you're not a body, okay? You're not completely the mind, because you can change and control that mind. So who are you? So this self that these masters, these teachers point to, it pushes a person in the fact that here's something that you cannot deny, that I, that me is, okay? And it further pushes you to inquire about that I, that self. So through their methods of teaching, the education that they present is to present a method methodology that would bring about these powers, these questions, like Socrates. His method of teaching was he would go around and ask questions and then allow you to answer those questions. And in that process, you would sort of like wake up. And certain questions the student may ask the teacher, like the Buddha, he didn't even ask, cause you to ponder on it. So these people who are aware of the art, the science of life and the art of living it, they have, through their own past experience, developed a way of approaching the common person on the street. If you wouldn't approach a person on the street with all these abstract, recondite ideas about theogony, theosophy on the higher level, but you come down with very simple stories to make them think to begin with. Everybody has a self and everybody thinks. And then what is the power and nature of thought and how powerful thought can be? So, and it's free. All this stuff is free. So that's where I think the relevancy of their approach to individuals on the street, be they in prison, be they completely out of the mainstream, or be they in the mainstream. But I say this too also, beware of approaching so-called educated individuals, because the upper educated, they're, to a lot of part, they're internally half asleep because it's been educated out of them. Okay. Yeah, they have become so intellectualized that they sit back and give and take, give and take. And until those folks, they're on that particular path, and life is a big teacher, so life would teach them.
Is that to say that there's an anti-intellectual aspect of the Theosophical movement?
I would say yay and nay. Cold-hearted intellect alone tends towards selfishness. But it's just like Sankar Park. He said in his writings, in his book, reason and enlightenment in Tibet, something like that. So reason comes from intellect. So it's not anti-intellectual. It seems to be the materialism of the age today. I mean, we have been poisoned, paralyzed, and perverted in our desire for life here, and that we use only our intellect only for just material gain and things like that. And these other spiritual ideas have just been completely, non-existence. So in the course of argument, Plato and the ideas, the philosophers, to sit down and communicate with these individuals, one would need to engage in that, to wake that up. But then at a certain point, you would leave that. Sure.
So did I hear you say that all of this is secret because we really don't know ourselves, because we have factored out in the modern world, in science, the key thing that holds everything together in this Buddhist understanding, which is the spirit part of it, and bringing this back in is what the message of Theosophy is about?
Well, when you say secret, it's what's that expression? Hidden in plain view. It's there. See, the individual, just like you're not initiated. No, there's no one saying that you cannot be initiated. You limit yourself through your qualifications, so you become, your eyes open according to how you move. So if your eyes aren't open, it's secret to you because you don't know. It's occult. It's esoteric. But if your eyes are open, it's right before you. It's been there all the time. So those folks, through their living, they have closed the door to this, which is already there. Okay? And what was the second part about science and all that you said?
Well, I guess it would be summed up in the acceptance of false ideas that that we are constantly being bombarded by. Really makes us secret.
Oh, yeah, right. That's what I'm saying. You have put yourself in that position, number one, but then again, you have, the cunning of the priests and the dogma of the state, and all those. They have taken advantage of the mass people. Okay, the masses are burdened with either Marxism or the communism and all that, and then just working wage slavery and things like that, and being in that position, those who manipulate society, then they keep them. That's why I think all of the throughout history, those who come ye out and be separate in other words, by you coming out, and these individuals who have come out over the years, they were called pagans, heathens, or whatever, but yet still they were free in mind. and they're open up to all these so-called secret things. Right? But if you stay locked in to the box, aspiring and desiring to what's coming out of the leaders of society, or those who control and run society, then you're on that treadmill of thought. And so you in a way set yourself up for not being able to go further because of your choices. But it's like nature's not telling you that you cannot come in, because it is your inheritance to enjoy all of this, because it's already within you. God and man are one. But unfortunately, the priests in the states, politicians, they always side with those who control the society, and then they don't perpetuate this message. Yeah.
It brings to mind the idea of reincarnation. You said in your survey, very few people really believed in that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because we are so ingrained in the idea of the one life theory,
mm-hmm.
because we recognize ourselves as this body, as this personality.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what this is
Mm-hmm.
taking.
Right. Well,
that underscores the idea of being bombarded by false information,
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and to the
Right.
point where we give up what is clearly around us. All we have to do is look at the laws of nature
Mm-hmm.
and see that reincarnation exists.
Right. We're in this rush, in this thing of survival of the fittest, struggle for existence. And success, it means acquiring material gains and goods. And we don't have time. And then if we're educated, a part of the middle class and upward, we're busy trying to sustain what we've acquired, and somebody comes along with something that's not relevant to social issues or material gain, you don't even want to hear it. You got your pastor or your priest to go to, and those are the things that are keeping you, again, locked into that box. Well, yeah, sure.
You talked about, I think you talked about yugas there, and we're in this age of
Kali Yuga.
age of Kali Yuga, which all of this stuff around us, it masks everything. Is that one reason why this message is brought out? And it probably is not very popular because it really frequently flies in the face of some of the stuff that's accepted in the world today.
Yes, indeed.
So is that the importance of this philosophy, to try to keep it alive so that it one day will open up this golden age?
Well,
so it'll change our thinking. Our humanity's thinking is going to be changed. What's the practical implication of spending so much time and effort trying to understand this philosophy and recreate ourselves into something that's more in line with the true philosophy of nature?
Phoebe, you want to answer that? What he just said? You want to give him an answer? No. Well, yes, Herb. You said a mouthful right there. I mean, it was like, a compound, complex paragraph. Yeah. But of course, the Kali Yuga is here, and HBB came 100 years. She says basically the secret doctrine was written for this time now. They being aware, of the cycles. They know when, just like the farmer knows when to plant the seeds for the forthcoming harvest. So when she was in her time, she came among, she was like threw the gauntlet down. She knew who was coming after her. She knew about the betrayal. She knew about the foibles of human nature, and she was strong enough to sustain the movement, to get it started. And those who came to her assistance, they know what. It's just like you going out there in traffic. You got to be in a vehicle. It has to be operable, brakes, lights, and stuff like that. So she knew where she had to come, and then to prepare the way, as she states in her writings. So when the next teacher arrived, they don't have to cut through all the basic stuff that, hey, this is this is that. Now, the ground is fertile. We are ripe for, even though this is a dark age and there are attempts to, there's always the brothers of the shadow, the contrary side, always there. But yet, as you got vistas open. When Newton had his say in his day, the universe was a clock, a machine. Today it's very mathematical. We got quantum mechanics, the mathematical energy, internet, all these things that's happening. And people, it's every day. The everyday person going to the internet, fax is even magic, stuff like that. So we're beginning to see that the physical world is gone. Okay, it's electromagnetic and it's thought and mathematical. So You know, the day of the, you know, the priest being angry, you know, like we say, beware of the wrath of the angry priest because you denied or you questioned his spiritual authority. That's archaic in a way. Yeah. Our time is up. Sure.